Innovation is often described as the act of introducing something new, whether to help us communicate, increase our efficiency, or simply add convenience. New innovations are critical to organizational success. In the context of an organizational setting, new innovations can include entirely new products, processes, or systems that create entirely new markets, and also variations to existing ones that create new patterns for consumer behavior. The impact of innovation can be seen in companies like Google, Apple, and Tesla, companies that have invested in new technology and subsequently provide value to their customers. Technology, like all things, goes through a cycle beginning at the time it's introduced, or birth, to the time that it's replaced, or death. We refer to the time from which a technology is introduced to when it is replaced as a technology cycle. For example, the introduction of cell phones replaced landline phones as the preferred method of communication. Although not instant, research has shown that these technology cycles follow patterns of predictable behavior, commonly known as the S-curve of innovation. The S-curve received its name from the pattern that technology cycles follow when displayed on a graph, resembling somewhat of an S in shape. By understanding the technology cycles of their products, managers are in a better position to make decisions as to where to allocate resources. To create an S-curve, we must first create a graph with a positive X and Y axis. The X-axis is going to represent effort, which includes things like time and money invested in the technology. The Y-axis will represent the improvement on performance. So the S-curve is really a visual representation of the extent that increases in effort lead to increases in performance. When a new innovation is introduced, expenditures of effort result in only small improvements in performance. This is depicted at point A of the S-curve. The reason for this is the technology surrounding the innovation is still in its infancy and thus underdeveloped. For example, pocket calculators were first introduced in the 1970s, yet were predominantly used by scientists and engineers who had previously used slide rules and log tables to solve complex problems. These early versions of the pocket calculator were expensive since the technology was relatively new, and this prevented mainstream customers from adopting the product. But as technology matured, the cost associated with producing such calculators began to diminish. In addition, calculators became smaller, more well-designed, and included additional features. So increases in effort, i.e. time and money, were starting to produce a larger increase in the performance of the product, which is shown at point B of the curve. Although this transition may seem to be rather quick, it wasn't until the late 1980s that pocket calculators could be produced cheap enough to appeal to mainstream consumers. As the technology begins to mature, though, that increase in effort once again leads to smaller improvements in performance. At this stage, which is shown at point C of the curve, the technology is often discontinued or goes through a reallocation of resources as the company diverts time and money to newer technologies. Take, for example, the introduction of desktop computers in the 1960s. Early models were quite expensive and weren't widely adopted until technological advances during the 1980s and 1990s. But as technology continued to mature, companies began to realize how to make the desktop computers smaller, lighter, and more versatile, which led to the introduction of the laptop computer. So as one technology begins to plateau, another takes its place as companies look to new innovations to replace the other. Laptop computers themselves are also beginning to see diminishing returns in performance improvements as tablet computers have become the newer technology. Now, we certainly still use laptop and desktop computers today, so it would be inaccurate to say that when a new technology is introduced, its predecessor goes away completely. Old and new technology has the capacity to coexist for a period of time. How long they coexist, though, is an uncertainty. So, what is the significance of the S-curve to business managers today? One that we've already discussed pertains to managerial decision-making. One of the roles of a manager is to make decisions regarding how to allocate scarce resources. By understanding the technology cycles of their own products, managers can determine when it's appropriate to reduce support for an older technology and shift to a newer technology. Another area of consideration is that within these technology cycles, the innovation will appeal to a different customer segment. So the challenge for managers is to position their products in a manner that they appeal to the appropriate customer segment. Take, for instance, the creation of the pocket calculator in the 1970s that we discussed earlier. Given its price, it wouldn't make much sense to attempt to sell the product to a larger customer segment. But as unit costs decrease, organizations have the ability to position their products to new segments. One question that I commonly receive when talking about S-curves is if an increase in effort leads to minimal performance improvements early on, then why don't organizations simply begin investing in emerging technology once it has developed? This is a good question, as a reasonable person would want to maximize the return they receive on an investment. But think about the time when technology does begin to develop and those performance improvements begin to become more significant. Who do you think is going to be better positioned to leverage the developing technology? An organization that has been expending the effort early on and has achieved a certain amount of familiarity and maybe even experience with how to leverage the technology? Or an organization that is a late entrant trying to catch up? Although the best return on investment comes from investing in developing technologies, organizations that want to utilize them need to expend the resources to develop experience in the emerging technology stage. So what do you think about the S-curve of innovation? Go ahead and leave your thoughts or questions below, and I'll do my best to get back to them in a timely fashion. After you've posted that question, go ahead and click the like button at the bottom of your screen, assuming of course that you've enjoyed this video. Lastly, remember to subscribe to Alanis Business Academy to have our latest videos sent to you while you sleep. Thanks for watching.